Small carrier, massive power. Sounds impossible, right? Yet there's one ship that shatters every rule about what a carrier should be. It's smaller than its rivals, lighter than its competitors, and still capable of launching aircraft at full combat weight, something only the world's largest supercarriers are supposed to do. How does a ship this compact pull off something that even major navies can't? Stick around. The secret is wild. When we look at the French Navy's aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle, the first thought that comes to our mind is about her size. She is a small carrier when compared to the giant American supercarriers. What if I say that she is even about 40% smaller than the British Queen Elizabeth-class carriers? Yes, you heard me right. And she is also smaller than the Russian Admiral Kuznetsov and the Chinese Shandong. Even though she is small, she is still the most powerful aircraft carrier in the world, outside the American ones. This simply shows that size does not always show how strong something is. So why is Charles de Gaulle so special? Well, the biggest reason for that is that she uses something called catapult-assisted takeoff and arrested recovery. People usually call it CATOBAR. What we need to know is that only American supercarriers have this system. Charles de Gaulle is the only non-American carrier in the world that also has catapults. Crazy, right? Some people might say that the Chinese Fujian carrier has catapults too, and that is true. But the Fujian is still doing sea trials. So as of now, Charles de Gaulle is the only active non-American carrier with working catapults. But why are catapults such a big deal? Well, many other navies use ski jump ramps instead of catapults. But there's a problem with ramps. They limit the takeoff weight of an aircraft. That means the aircraft cannot carry too much fuel or too many weapons. So, if they use catapults, aircraft can take off at a much heavier weight. This means they can travel longer distances and carry more weapons. So aircraft launched from Charles de Gaulle will have more range and more punch. What if I tell you that there is also something interesting about the catapults on this ship? Yeah, they are shorter than the ones on American carriers. The catapults on Charles de Gaulle are 246 feet long, and the ones on American carriers are about 310 feet long. Since the French ones are shorter, they must push the aircraft faster to make takeoff possible. So there will be a lot of force in just a few seconds. Each catapult can launch a 25-ton aircraft at 145 knots in under 2 seconds. When we look at the theory, we can say that the carrier can launch an aircraft every 30 seconds. But this is not the case in the real operations. Yes, the maximum rate is about 25 aircraft every 4 hours. So what does this catapult system allow France to do? Well, the first big thing is early warning aircraft. Charles de Gaulle can launch the E-2C Hawkeye. The Hawkeye has a powerful radar that can see targets up to 300 nautical miles away. Another advantage is that the French carrier is fully compatible with American aircraft. This means she can operate with American supercarriers. She can launch United States Navy aircraft like the C-2 Greyhound, the F/A-18, and the E-2D Hawkeye. And French Rafale fighters can also land and take off from American carriers. So this makes France and the United States very strong partners at sea. Charles de Gaulle has 3 wires for arrested landing and has 2 deck-edge elevators and 2 catapults. Each elevator can move 2 aircraft every 2 minutes. Inside the hangar, the ship can store 23 fixed-wing aircraft and 2 helicopters. The E-2C Hawkeye stays on the deck because it does not fit inside the hangar. The main aircraft on the carrier is the Dassault Rafale Marine. She can carry up to 36 Rafales, but normally it carries only around 24 to 30. When the French Navy combines the fighters and the early warning aircraft, they can control a huge bubble of air, land, and sea. This bubble can be between 370 miles and 430 miles wide. Only the American supercarriers have this same level of power. The ship normally carries 2 Hawkeyes, one as 565 Panther helicopter for maritime intelligence, and another with the call sign Pedro. During flight operations, there will always be a helicopter flying about 340 feet to the left side of the ship. So if a pilot ejects into the water, Pedro can rescue them within 3 minutes. And this is extremely important for saving lives. What's more interesting is that Charles de Gaulle also has an aircraft repair shop that runs 24 hours a day. It has more than 1 million spare parts and 2 test benches for engines. Because of this, the Rafale fighters have a 94% availability rate. That means if there are 36 Rafales on board, about 34 are ready to fly at any moment. For you to understand more, we can compare it with the availability of the American carriers. Well, in 2014, the FA-18 availability rate on American carriers was 43%. By 2023, it improved to 80%. But when we think about the French, it is still very impressive. Another major strength of Charles de Gaulle is its nuclear power. Only France and the United States have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. With the help of nuclear power, the ship can sail at 25 knots for about 5 years without refueling. Nuclear power also helps to accelerate the ship quickly. She can go from 0 to 20 knots in just 4 minutes and reach her top speed of 20 knots in 7 minutes. But on the other hand, the older carriers that run on gas or oil take much longer to reach top speed. Nuclear reactors save space. 2. They do not need smokestacks or large fuel tanks. But choosing nuclear power also caused some problems. The island on Charles de Gaulle sits in a forward position. This was done intentionally by the designers to make it easier to access the nuclear reactors during refueling, and it needs refueling every 7 to 10 years. The French reactors are also not very powerful. France reused the same reactor from the Lee Triomphant-class submarine. Instead of designing a new reactor, each of the 2 K-15 reactors on Charles de Gaulle produces 150 megawatts. The American A4-watt reactors make 550 megawatts each, and that's why American carriers can reach speeds between 35 and 40 knots. But the reactors were not the main problem. Yes, the real problem was the propellers. In November 2000, while sailing to Norfolk, one of the propeller blades broke off and sank. But before this happened, the Navy already knew the propellers were defective, but they still installed them without caring much about it. When the carrier returned to France, they checked the spare propellers and found they were defective too. The copper alloy used for the propellers had many bubbles and cracks, and this became a huge scandal in France. But later, a fire destroyed the design files at the supplier's office. The ship was stuck for 18 months without any working propellers, but they found a solution. They removed the old propellers from the retiring carrier Clemenceau and installed them on Charles de Gaulle. These older propellers caused vibrations at high speeds, so the ship was limited to about 25 knots, but the problem was still not solved. Then came the new propellers from the United States in 2000. After that, the ship was able to reach her full speed of 27 knots. Even though the ship has nuclear power, its operations were limited by food and aircraft fuel. She carries 315 tons of food, 600 tons of weapons, and 3,400 tons of aviation fuel. If the carrier has to stay longer, 1 or 2 tankers will be assigned to keep the supplies moving. But there is one big weakness. Well, Charles de Gaulle is the only carrier France has. So when she goes into maintenance, France loses its carrier power completely. And this is why the British built 2 Queen Elizabeth-class carriers. So, if one is in maintenance, the other stays active. Many experts say a navy needs at least 3 carriers. France once planned to build 2 nuclear carriers in the 1980s. French naval aviators are among the most experienced in the world, and Charles de Gaulle has been sent on many missions in Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, and Syria. In December 2020, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that Charles de Gaulle would retire in 2038. He said she will be replaced by a new carrier called Pang. She will have new K-22 reactors, electromagnetic catapults, and advanced arresting gear. And this will make Pang the first French supercarrier. So now you know why a small carrier like Charles de Gaulle is the most powerful in the world after the American supercarriers. So, what do you think? Do you think France should have built more carriers? Do you think the new Pang carrier will be stronger than the Charles de Gaulle? Let us know your answers in the comments below.